Hi guys, the Jurassic Period is a vast and quiet stretch of our planet's history. A time that began roughly 201 million years ago and lasted for over 50 million years. To us, looking back through the heavy mists of time, it represents the middle chapter of the Mesozoic era golden age, where the Earth truly found its rhythm. It matters not just because it was the time of the great dinosaurs, but because it was the era when the world as we might recognize it today began to take its shape. It was a time of immense transition, where continents slowly drifted apart like ships in a calm sea, and life found new ways to flourish in a world that was becoming warmer, greener, and more vibrant with every passing million years. As we settle in tonight, I want you to imagine the Earth not as a place of chaos or ancient violence, but as a slow-moving, breathing entity. The Jurassic was a period of profound patience. It was a time of deep, humid forests, of vast inland seas that shimmered under a younger sun, and of a climate that wrapped the globe in a soft, consistent warmth. By understanding the Jurassic, we are really understanding the resilience of life itself, how it recovers from the brink of silence and weaves a new, more complex tapestry of existence. It is a story of healing, growth, and the steady, rhythmic pulse of a planet finding its footing in the deep dark of space. Imagine, if you will, that the world has gone very quiet. We are standing at the edge of a great transition, right at the closing of the Triassic period. The air is heavy and still. For millions of years, the Earth had been a rugged place, dominated by a single, massive supercontinent called Pangaea. But as the Triassic drew to a close, the land began to groan under the weight of immense internal pressures. Great rifts began to open in the crust, and the sky turned a dusty, bruised purple as volcanic activity on a scale we can hardly conceive began to alter the chemistry of the atmosphere. This was the great extinction that cleared the stage for what was to come a period of loss. Yes, but also a clearing of the way, a long, deep breath before a new song began, as the dust eventually settled and the fires of the Triassic rift zones cooled into dark basalt. A profound silence fell over the world. The early days of the Jurassic were not filled with the thunder of giant footsteps, but rather with the soft sound of rain. The Earth was beginning to heal itself. The carbon that had choked the atmosphere was slowly being pulled back into the Earth by the emerging greenery. You can almost feel the dampness of the soil as the first true Jurassic forests began to take root in the wake of the devastation. The ferns, resilient and ancient, were the first to carpet the charred earth, spreading their delicate fronds over the cooling lava flows, turning the scorched browns and blacks of the old world into a soft, mossy emerald. The climate was changing now, moving away from the harsh, arid extremes of the Triassic and into something more uniform, more nurturing. There were no polar ice caps in this world. Instead, the warmth was distributed evenly from the equator to the poles. Imagine a world where the breeze is always lukewarm, where the nights never bite with a chill, and where the moisture in the air feels like a soft, invisible blanket against your skin. The continents were still huddled close together, but the great rift was beginning to fill with water, creating the ancestral Atlantic Ocean, a narrow, shallow ribbon of turquoise that sparkled under the sun, separating the land masses with a gentle, insistent pressure. The oceans of the early Jurassic were a sanctuary of profound depth and shifting blues. As the sea levels rose, they flooded the low-lying areas of the continents, creating vast, sun-drenched epicontinental seas. These were not the dark, crushing depths of the open Pacific, but warm, shallow nurseries where life could experiment in peace. Beneath the surface of these tepid waters, The ancestors of the great marine reptiles moved with a fluid, effortless grace. The ichthyosaurs, shaped like sleek, prehistoric dolphins, glided through the water with barely a ripple. Their large eyes designed to catch the faint glimmers of light in the deeper channels. The water was thick with beautiful creatures that drifted like living jewels through the kelp forests, their shells catching the filtered sunlight in shades of pearl and amber. If you were to stand on the shore of one of these ancient seas, you would hear the rhythmic lap of the tide against a coastline that had never known a human footprint. The sand was coarse and volcanic, dotted with the bleached shells of creatures that had finished their long journeys. Above, the sky was a pale, soft blue, streaked with high, thin clouds that moved slowly across the horizon. The atmosphere was richer in oxygen than what we breathe today, making every breath feel light and invigorating. In this air, the early pterosaurs began to claim the heights. They were not yet the giants they would become, but small, leathery-winged explorers, flitting between the tall cycads and the ginkgo trees, their chirps lost in the vast, echoing space of the prehistoric wilderness. The continents themselves felt heavy and grounded, in the heart of what would one day be North America and Africa. The land was a mosaic of winding river systems and expansive floodplains. The soil was rich, dark, and eternally moist. Huge conifers, ancestors of the modern monkey puzzle tree and the majestic redwoods, reached toward the sun, their bark thick and resinous, smelling of pine and ancient earth. There were no flowers, yet no roses, no daisies, no bright splashes of petal color to break the sea of green. Instead, the beauty of the Jurassic landscape lay in its textures, the rough scales of a tree trunk, the velvet softness of a moss-covered log, the intricate geometric patterns of a fern frond. It was a world of monochromatic brilliance, where 1,000 shades of green blended into the misty grays of the morning fog. The transition from the Triassic to the Jurassic was like a long, slow sunrise. As the millions of years ticked by, the survivors of the extinction began to grow and diversify. The early dinosaurs of this time were not yet the mountain-sized beasts of legend, but they were elegant, bipedal creatures, moving with a cautious, bird-like precision through the undergrowth. They were the pioneers of a new order. You can imagine them huddled together under the canopy during a soft afternoon rain, their breath misting in the humid air, their golden eyes watching the shadows for the movement of a rival or a mate. There was a sense of unfolding potential in every movement, a feeling that the earth was preparing for something magnificent. The soundscape of the early Jurassic was one of natural music. There was the constant, low-frequency hum of insect sludge, prehistoric dragonflies with wingspans like small birds, darting over the stagnant pools of the wetlands. There was the creak of the great trees as they swayed in the gentle trade winds, their branches rubbing together like the strings of a cello. And always, there was the sound of water, the trickle of a stream over smoothed stones, the heavy thrum of a waterfall in the distance, the sigh of the ocean as it reclaimed the beach. It was a world without the mechanical noise of the future, a world where the only sounds were the ones made by the wind, the water, and the slow, steady heartbeat of the living as the evening of the early Jurassic stretched on. The nights were illuminated by a moon that appeared slightly larger and brighter in the sky than the one we see today. The stars were familiar yet rearranged, a different map of the heavens looking down on a world of giants in the making. In the cool of the night, the earth exhaled the heat of the day, creating low-hanging mists that swirled around the ankles of the sleeping forests. The predators of the time, the lithe, sharp-toothed Coelophysis and their kin would move silently through these mists, their silhouettes ghost-like against the pale moonlight. Everything was in a state of becoming. The foundations of the modern world were being laid down in the silence of those Jurassic nights, in the slow drift of the tectonic plates and the steady evolution of the lung and the limb dot. The world felt thick. The air had a weight to it, a richness that supported the growth of massive life forms. It was a time of abundance. The seas were so full of life that the very sand on the beaches was often composed of the ground down, remains of millions of years of oceanic success. On land, the sheer volume of plant matter was staggering. Fallen trees would lay for centuries, slowly turning into the coal seams that we would one day mine, their energy stored up from the Jurassic sun, waiting for a future they could never imagine. Every corner of the planet was being claimed by life. From the highest mountain plateaus to the deepest river valleys, the Jurassic was a period of colonization, where nature proved that no matter how great the devastation of the past, the future would always find a way to bloom as we linger here. In the early dawn of this great period, we see the first of the true giants beginning to appear. They are the sauropodomorphs, the long-necked wanderers who found that the pernice's abundance of the Jurassic forests allowed them to grow larger than any land animal that had come before. They moved in small family groups, their heavy footsteps muffled by the soft carpet of needles and moss. To see them was to see the earth itself in motions low, deliberate, and unstoppable. They did not hurry, for there was no need to hurry in a world where food was everywhere and the seasons blended into one long, eternal summer. The transition from the early mists of the Jurassic into its middle age was not a sudden awakening, but a slow and graceful unfurling, much like the opening of a giant fern under the morning sun. As you drift back into this ancient world, imagine the air has grown even thicker, even more nourishing. The silence of the early days has been replaced by a deep, resonant vibration, the sound of a planet that has finally found its full voice. The healing is complete. The scars of the old world are buried deep beneath layers of rich, black soil, and the stage is now fully set for the most magnificent inhabitants the earth has ever known. It is easy to wonder, as we stand in the dappled light of a ginkgo grove, why it was the dinosaurs that inherited this kingdom. In the quiet of the night, it feels like a dream of perfect design. While other creatures clung to the shadows or the cooling waters, the dinosaurs possessed a unique, quiet resilience. They walked with their legs tucked neatly beneath their bodies, a subtle shift in posture that allowed them to move with a fluid, rhythmic efficiency across the vast distances of Pangaea. This was not about speed or aggression. It was about the economy of motion. Every step they took was a soft testament to balance, allowing them to grow larger and wander further than any creature before them. The environment itself seemed to conspire in their favor. The world was a giant, humid greenhouse, a place where the seasons were whispers rather than shouts. In this constant warmth, the dinosaurs didn't need to spend their energy just to keep their bodies warm. The sun and the heavy air did that work for them. This left them free to grow, to explore, and to inhabit every corner of the landscape. They were the children of the Jurassic's abundance, rising like the great conifers they lived among, stretching toward the light in a slow-motion race. Toward the clouds, imagine the early theropods moving through the undergrowth. These were the ancestors of the great hunters, but in this light, they are not monsters. They are elegant, bird-like figures, their bodies covered in a fine, soft down that catches the dew of the morning. They move with a deliberate, haunting grace, their tails held level to balance their weight, their golden eyes reflecting the greenery of the forest. They do not roar. They communicate in low, guttural clicks and soft hooting sounds that carry through the humid air like the call of a distant owl. To watch them is to watch a masterclass in precision, how they pick their way over moss-covered logs, their clawed feet making barely a sound on the damp carpet of the forest floor. As the day warms, the light begins to filter through the canopy in long, golden shafts, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. In the distance, the ground begins to tremble, but it is a gentle tremor, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. These are the early sauropods, the long-necked wanderers who decided that the best way to survive was to become as vast as the hills. They are moving toward the riverbeds, their massive bodies swaying with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. You can hear the rhythmic thud-squelch of their feet in the soft mud, a sound that is both heavy and peaceful. These giants are the true architects of the Jurassic landscape. As they move, they create paths through the dense ferns, opening up skylights in the forest canopy that allow smaller plants to thrive. They are not just animals. They are moving ecosystems. On their broad backs, small insects hitch rides, and in their wake, the forest floor is churned into fertile new ground. Their necks, long and elegant, sweep through the high branches like the cranes of a quiet shipyard, stripping the soft needles from the conifers with a methodical, rasping sound. It is a slow, steady harvest, a quiet communion between the animal and the tree. The evolution of these giants was a response to the sheer scale of the world. In a land of endless forests and rising seas, size was a sanctuary. To be large was to be safe, to be a mountain that the storms of life could not move. But this size was only possible because of the air they breathed and the way their bodies were built. Their bones were not solid, heavy weights. They were filled with delicate air sacs, honeycombed structures that made them light enough to move, but strong enough to support their immense frames. They were like living cathedrals, airy and grand, held together by the gentle pressure of the atmosphere. As the sun reaches its zenith, the Jurassic world settles into a midday lull. The heat is not oppressive, but it is pervasive, encouraging a slow, sleepy stillness. The great hunters find shade beneath the towering cycads, their breathing slow and rhythmic. The herbivores congregate near the water's edge, where the breeze off the lake carries a hint of salt and coolness. You can hear the dragonflies zipping over the water, their iridescent wings humming at a frequency that blends into the background of the forest. The water itself is still a mirror for the towering cumulus clouds that pile up like snowdrifts in the pale. Blue sky. The life of a dinosaur was a life of patience. There were no hours or minutes, only the position of the sun and the cooling of the evening air. They lived in a world of sensory richness, the smell of crushed pine, the taste of mineral-rich water, the feel of the sun on their pebbled skin. Evolution was not a struggle in this dreamlike state. It was a slow unfolding, a series of small, quiet adjustments that allowed life to fit more perfectly into the grooves of the planet. Each generation grew a little taller, moved a little more efficiently, and felt a little more at home in the emerald light of the Jurassic dot in the late afternoon. The light begins to turn a deep, honeyed amber. This is when the world feels most magical. The shadows of the giant trees stretch out across the floodplains, reaching like long fingers toward the rising tide. The early pterosaurs, their leathery wings catching the golden light, begin to glide down from their high roosts, skimming the surface of the rivers to catch the late-day insects. There is no urgency in their flight. They soar on the thermals, rising and falling with the breathing of the land. Their silhouettes sharp and clean against the glowing sky. If you listen closely, you can hear the sound of the wind through the monkey-puzzled trees. It is a dry, whispering sound, a language of needles and scales. It tells the story of the continents as they continue to drift, of the North Atlantic opening up like a widening smile between the landmasses. The earth is shifting beneath the feet of the dinosaurs, but it happens so slowly that it is only felt in the changing of the tides and the subtle migration of the stars. The world is a vast, interconnected puzzle, and the dinosaurs are the pieces that have finally found their place. The relationship between these creatures and their environment was one of perfect harmony. The sauropods didn't just eat the trees, they helped spread their seeds. The theropods didn't just hunt, they kept the herds moving, ensuring that no single area was overgrazed. It was a dance of balance, performed in slow motion over millions of years. In this dream, we see that there is no red in tooth and claw violence here, only a steady, rhythmic cycle of energy passing from the sun to the leaf, from the leaf to the giant, and eventually back to the soil to begin the cycle anew. As the evening settles in, the colors of the world begin to soften. The vibrant greens turn to shades of slate and charcoal. The orange of the sun fades into a bruised purple, and the first stars begin to poke through the thinning clouds. The air grows slightly cooler, and a low mist begins to roll off the inland seas, creeping into the low-lying valleys. This mist is the breath of the Jurassic, a damp, cool veil that protects the sleeping world. The dinosaurs find their resting places, huddling together for warmth or finding the shelter of a thick thicket. The daily life of a dinosaur was marked by these transitions from the light to the dark, from the heat to the cool. They were deeply attuned to the rhythms of the earth. We can imagine a young sauropod, its skin still soft and its neck not yet reaching the highest branches, standing at the edge of a clearing. It watches the moon rise, its large, dark eye reflecting the silver light. It feels the vibration of its mother's heartbeat through the ground, a steady, comforting thrum that tells it all is well. There is a profound sense of safety in this moment, a knowledge that the world is large and bountiful and that there is time for everything. The silence of the Jurassic night is not empty. It is a full, living silence. It is the sound of 1,000 hearts beating in unison, of the slow respiration of the forests, and of the distant, eternal murmur of the sea. The earth is dreaming of the giants it is creating. It is a dream of scale and majesty, of creatures that will walk the earth for 100 million years and leave their mark in the very stones of the mountains. To be in the Jurassic is to be part of this dream, to feel the slow pulse of time and the immense, quiet power of nature as it builds something lasting and grand. As we move through the darkness of the Middle Jurassic, we see the silhouettes of the true titans beginning to take shape. They are no longer just the pioneers. They are the masters of the world. Their shadows fall across the land like the shadows of clouds, vast and silent. They have mastered the art of being, of existing on a scale that defies the imagination. And yet, they are as much a part of the earth as the ferns they eat and the water they drink. They are the Jurassic made flesh, the spirit of the greenhouse era given form and movement. The world has grown very still now, as if the earth itself is holding its breath in the presence of something truly monumental. As we move deeper into the heart of the late Jurassic, the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient resins. a heavy, humid perfume that hangs over the landscape like a warm velvet curtain. This is the era of the Titans, a time when life reached a scale that feels more like a dream than a reality. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing in a vast, open floodplain. The sky is a pale, shimmering opal, and the horizon is not a flat line, but a series of undulating curves made by the backs of giants. These are the sauropods, the gentle cathedrals of flesh and bone that have come to define this golden age of the world. To understand these creatures, we must first understand the patience of the trees. The forests of the late Jurassic were not like the forests we know today. There were no oaks or maples, but towering groves of conifers, ginkgos, and monkey puzzle trees that reached hundreds of feet into the air. These trees were the storehouses of the sun's energy, and the sauropods were the only beings capable of unlocking that vast, high-altitude bounty. Imagine the Brachiosaurus, a creature so immense that its very name evokes the strength of a mountain. As it moves through the grove, its front legs are longer than its back, giving its body a sloping, graceful incline like the roof of a great temple. Its neck rises upward, a long, elegant column that disappears into the misty canopy of the highest branches. Watch the Brachiosaurus as it feeds. There is no violence in its movement, no rush to find the next meal. It uses its peg-like teeth to gently comb the soft needles from the branches, its head moving with the slow, rhythmic precision of a gardener. The sound is a soft, repetitive shee-shee, like the wind passing through dry grass. Because its neck is so long, it can reach the greenery that no other living thing can touch. It lives in a world of its own, high above the forest floor, where the air is cooler and the light is clearer. It is a sentinel of the heights, a silent observer of the world below, its heartbeat a slow, steady drum that echoes through its massive chest. The sheer size of these animals was not a burden, but a form of grace. To be as large as an Apatosaurus or a Diplodocus was to exist in a different dimension of time. Every step they took was a deliberate act of physics, a slow transfer of weight from one pillar-like limb to another. Their feet, broad and padded with thick, shock-absorbing tissue, would press into the soft, Jurassic mud with a heavy, wet thrum. When an Apatosaurus walked, the ground would tremble, not with the violence of an earthquake, but with the steady, reassuring pulse of the Earth's own life. These were the thunder lizards, yet they were as quiet as the falling rain. They moved in family groups, their long tails trailing behind them like the wake of a great ship, swaying rhythmically to balance the immense reach of their necks. The Diplodocus was a masterpiece of horizontal elegance. Unlike the Brachiosaurus, which reached for the heavens, the Diplodocus was built like a living suspension bridge. Its neck stretched forward across the low-lying ferns, and its tail tapering to a thin, whip-like end stretched far behind it, creating a silhouette that was incredibly long and lithe. Imagine it standing at the edge of a wide, slow-moving river. The water reflects the gold of the afternoon sun, and the Diplodocus lowers its head to drink. Its neck moves like a ripple on the water's surface, reaching out toward the center of the stream where the current is coolest. As it drinks, you can hear the soft, rhythmic swallowing, a sound that seems to vibrate through the very air. How did the world support such immense life? The answer lies in the rivers and the rain. The late Jurassic was a world of water. Great river systems meandered across the continents, carving wide, fertile valleys that were constantly replenished by seasonal floods. These floodplains were the breadbaskets of the giants. The silt left behind by the receding waters fueled the growth of endless prairies of ferns and horsetails, soft succulent plants that grew with an almost visible speed in the tropical heat. A herd of Diplodocus could graze across these plains for weeks, their necks sweeping back and forth like harvesting the greenery with an efficiency that allowed them to maintain their mountain-sized bodies without ever having to run or fight. The digestive systems of these giants were like slow-turning furnaces. Inside their vast bellies, the plant matter they consumed would sit for days, breaking down slowly through fermentation. Some of them even swallowed large, smooth stones gastroliths which tumbled in their stomachs like river rocks, grinding the tough fibers of the conifers into a soft, digestible pulp. You can imagine the sound of these stones clicking together deep inside the animal, a muffled, rhythmic grinding that mirrored the sound of the world around them. It was a life of constant, quiet processing, a life where the main occupation was simply the steady absorption of the Earth's abundance. As the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting long, violet shadows across the riverbanks, the world of the giants enters a period of profound tranquility. The heat of the day begins to radiate back out from the earth, creating a soft, shimmering haze that blurs the lines between the forest and the sky. In this light, the sauropods look like statues carved from the grey stone of the mountains. They stand perfectly still for long periods, their heads held high as they scan the horizon with their large, liquid eyes. They are watching for the subtle shifts in the wind, the movement of the clouds, or the distant approach of a rival herd. The communication between these giants was a language of the deep. They did not use the high-pitched calls of the birds or the sharp barks of the smaller predators. Instead, they produced infrasonic sounds, low-frequency rumbles that were too deep for a human ear to hear, but which could be felt in the chest and the soles of the feet. These sounds could travel for miles through the dense Jurassic air, allowing a mother Apatosaurus to speak to her young across a vast distance, or a lone Brachiosaurus to signal its presence to a mate hidden behind a ridge of hills. It was a world of secret, subsonic conversations, a constant, low-grade humming that bound the landscape together. Imagine the skin of these creatures, not the cold, slimy scales of a modern reptile, but a warm, leathery surface textured with small, non-overlapping scales that felt like the bark of a tree or the surface of a river stone. In the cooling evening air, their skin would hold the warmth of the sun, making them like large, radiating heaters for the smaller creatures that lived in their shadows. Tiny mammals, the distant ancestors of everything we know, might huddle near the massive, warm columns of an Apatosaurus's legs, finding safety in the presence of a mountain that did not notice them, but protected them nonetheless. The rivers of the late Jurassic were the lifelines that connected these giants to the rest of the world. As the herds moved from one valley to the next, they followed the ancient paths carved by the water. These river corridors were like green highways, lined with the lushest vegetation and the coolest shade. You can see the Diplodocus herds wading into the shallows, their massive weight supported by the buoyancy of the water, their tails floating behind them like submerged cables. The water would lap against their sides, a cool relief from the afternoon sun, and the fish would dart between their legs, feeding on the organisms stirred up from the riverbed. The sky during these evening hours was a theater of soft, shifting colors. The dust from the volcanic rifts far to the east would catch the light, turning the clouds into shades of rose, amber, and deep, bruised plum. Against this backdrop, the silhouettes of the sauropods were magnificent. Their necks would intersect the horizon like the masts of ancient sailing ships, and their slow, rhythmic movements gave the landscape a sense of eternal, unhurried purpose. There was no anxiety in this world, no sense of time running out. There was only the present moment, the taste of the ferns, the cool of the water, and the steady, grounding presence of the herd. As we linger in this dream of giants, we begin to see the beauty in their simplicity. They did not need complex tools or rapid movements to dominate their world. They only needed to be. Their success was a testament to the power of the slow road, the value of being large and steady in a world that was constantly shifting. They were the anchors of the Jurassic ecosystem, the pillars upon which the entire world rested. Without them, the forests would have overgrown. The rivers would have choked with debris, and the grand cycle of life would have ground to a halt now. The sun has finally slipped beneath the horizon, leaving only a faint golden glow at the edge of the world. The stars are beginning to appear, one by one, looking down on a landscape that is slowly settling into sleep. The great Brachiosaurus lowers its head from the canopy, its long neck descending like a falling star. Until its head is level with the rest of its body, it lets out a long, slow breath, a deep, huffing sound that carries the scent of the high forest down to the ground. The Apatosaurus herd has gathered in a tight circle on the floodplain, the younger ones tucked safely in the center, shielded by the massive bodies of their elders. As the moon climbs higher over the Jurassic horizon, casting a pale silver sheen across the jagged ridges of the mountains, we turn our attention away from the great herbivores and toward the shadows that dance at the edge of the forest. Tonight, we find ourselves in the company of the master of this realm, the Allosaurus. In the soft, hushed tones of a midnight story, it is important to remember that in the Jurassic, there were no villains. There was only the beautiful, complex machinery of life seeking to sustain itself. The predator was not a creature of malice, but a vital part of the Earth's own rhythm, a graceful presence that ensured the world remained in a state of perfect, thriving balance. Imagine the Allosaurus not as a figure of terror, but as a masterpiece of biological elegance. It stands roughly 15 feet tall, its body a study in lean, powerful symmetry, its skin perhaps a muted shade of forest green or a dusty slate gray, allows it to blend seamlessly into the shifting patterns of light and shadow cast by the towering site. As it moves, it does so with a surprising, liquid softness. There is no heavy thumping of feet. Instead, it possesses a delicate, bird-like gait, its weight distributed across its three-toed feet with such precision that it barely disturbs the dry needles of the forest floor. You can hear the faint, rhythmic rustle of its scales rubbing together, a sound no louder than a breath of wind through a pine grove. The Allosaurus is a creature of immense patience. In the cool of the late evening, it might spend hours perfectly still, its golden eyes tracking the movement of the stars and the slow drift of the clouds. It is deeply connected to the air around it. Its snout is long and refined, filled with sophisticated sensory chambers that allow it to read the story of the landscape through the scent of the breeze. It can smell the dampness of a distant river, the resin of a broken branch, and the warm, musk-like presence of a grazing herd miles away. To the Allosaurus, the air is a map, a series of invisible trails that guide it through the vast, dark world of the late Jurassic. Hunting, in this ancient time, was not a chaotic event, but a slow and ritualistic dance of nature. Imagine a small group of Allosaurus, perhaps a family unit moving through the silver-lit ferns. They communicate in low, vibrating hums that are felt more than heard, a secret language of the shadows. They are not looking for a fight. They are looking for the gift of sustenance. They watch a herd of Stegosaurus in the distance, the plates on the herbivores' backs glowing like dull embers in the moonlight. There is a profound respect in this observation. The predator knows the strength of its quarry, and the quarry knows the skill of the predator. It is a relationship billions of years in the making, a silent agreement that keeps the world from becoming stagnant. When the time comes to move, the Allosaurus does so with a focused, meditative intensity. Its breathing remains slow and steady, its heart beating with a calm, powerful thrum. It uses the natural contours of the land, the deep ravines, the thickets of horsetails, the trunks of the fallen giants to mask its approach. This is the art of the Jurassic, the ability to become one with the environment. The predator is not separate from the forest. It is the forest in motion. It understands the angle of the moon and the direction of the wind. It waits for the perfect moment of alignment, a moment where the needs of the hunter and the state of the world meet in a quiet, inevitable point of contact. The physical attributes of the Allosaurus are designed for this elegant labor. Its skull is light and strong, built to absorb the pressures of its life without being a burden to carry. Its teeth are not like ours. They are serrated blades, curved slightly backward, designed to work with the natural laws of physics. But even more impressive are its arms, shorter than its legs, but immensely strong, tipped with 3 sharp claws that it uses with the dexterity of a craftsman. As it reaches out to steady itself or to navigate the dense undergrowth, its movements are as precise as those of a watchmaker. There is no wasted energy, no unnecessary display of force in the Jurassic. The presence of the predator served a higher purpose. By occasionally removing the old, the weak, or the ill from the great herds, the Allosaurus acted as a guardian of the future. It ensured that the resources of the forest, the precious water, and the high canopy leaves were available for the strongest and healthiest members of the herbivore families. Without the Allosaurus, the Diplodocus and the Brachiosaurus might have multiplied until they stripped the land bare, leading to a silence far more profound than any hunt. The predator was the gardener of the animal kingdom, pruning the edges of the population to allow the whole to bloom more vibrantly. Think of the sounds of the Jurassic night when the hunters are active. It is not a time of screaming or turmoil. Most often, it is a time of deep, expectant stillness. You might hear the occasional snap of a dry branch, or the soft, wet sliding of a predator's body through a marshy reeds. Sometimes, there is a low, booming roar that echoes off the canyon walls, not a cry of anger, but a declaration of territory, a way for the Allosaurus to say to the night, "I am here, and I am part of this world." These sounds are as natural as the crashing of waves or the rumbling of thunder. They are the tectonic plates of life shifting against one another. As the hunt concludes and the needs of the day are met, the Allosaurus enters a state of deep, restorative rest. Imagine it lying down in a secluded hollow, its massive body curling into the soft earth. Its head rests on its powerful forelimbs, its eyes closing as the moonlight filters through the canopy above. The warmth of its meal and the exertion of the day create a pleasant, heavy fatigue. In this state, the predator is as vulnerable and as peaceful as the smallest creature in the forest. It dreams, perhaps, of the endless plains and the golden light of the sun on the water. It is a cycle of exertion and repose that has remained unchanged for eons. The Jurassic world felt safe for the predator, just as it did for the prey, because both were contained within a system that worked. There was no fear of extinction, no sense of a world out of balance. The Allosaurus lived in a state of constant mindfulness, aware of every leaf, every breeze, and every heartbeat. This connection to the present moment is what we feel when we imagine their world. It is a world where every action has a meaning, and where the end of one life is always the beginning of another. The golden thread of energy flows through the Allosaurus, just as it flows through the ferns and the giants. A single, unbroken line of existence. As the middle of the night approaches, the air grows even cooler, and a thick, white fog begins to rise from the forest floor, swallowing the feet of the giant trees. The Allosaurus remains in its hollow, its breathing a slow, rhythmic sigh that blends with the sound of the distant river. The forest is a place of infinite layers, the high-pitched buzzing of insects, the rustle of the small mammals in the leaf litter, and the heavy, silent presence of the resting predators. Everything has found its place. The tension of the day has dissolved into the cool, damp embrace of the night. In this dreamlike state, we see that the predator is a teacher of grace. It teaches us about the importance of focus, the necessity of patience, and the beauty of being perfectly adapted to one's purpose. There is a dignity in the life of an Allosaurus, a quiet nobility that comes from being a vital gear in the great clock of the earth. It does not take more than it needs. It does not destroy for the sake of destruction. It moves through the world with a profound economy of spirit, a silent witness to the majesty of the late Jurassic. The landscape around the resting hunter is alive with the subtle movements of the night. A light wind carries the spores of 1,000 ferns through the air, drifting like invisible snow. Above, the pterosaurs have tucked their heads under their wings, roosting on the high cliffs that overlook the plains. The world is a vast, breathing entity, and every creature within it is a cell, working together to keep the whole alive. The Allosaurus, even in its sleep, is contributing to this harmony. Its presence a reminder that life is a delicate, beautiful, and eternal balance as we stand in the clearing, watching the mist swirl around the sleeping forms of the giants and the hunters alike. We realize that there is no division between them. They are all made of the same Jurassic stardust, fueled by the same ancient sun, and governed by the same gentle laws of the planet. The predator is the dark side of the moon, necessary, mysterious, and deeply peaceful in its own way. We let the image of the resting Allosaurus fade into the shadows, feeling a sense of gratitude for the role it plays in this ancient story. The night is now at its deepest point. The stars are at their brightest, and the moon is a high, silver shield. The forest is a cathedral of silence, broken only by the very softest whispers of the living world. The great hunters have retreated into the darkness of the groves, their outlines lost among the trunks of the ginkgos and the conifers. They have become part of the night itself, a quiet power that waits for the coming of the dawn. As we drift away from the dark, silent corridors of the forest and the heavy breathing of the land-bound giants, we find ourselves drawn toward the rhythmic, sighing edge of the world. Imagine the sound of the Jurassic coastknot a crashing, violent surf, but a gentle, persistent lapping of tepid water against sands of volcanic black and coral white. The air here is different. It is thicker with the scent of salt and ancient minerals, a briny sweetness that speaks of life's very beginnings. The moon, hanging low and heavy over the horizon, carves a path of shattered silver across the surface of the Tethys Sea. We are standing at the threshold of a hidden kingdom, a world of weightless grace where the laws of the land no longer apply. And as we wade into the warm, shallow shallows, the world of gravity begins to dissolve. The Jurassic seas were a masterpiece of thermal stability. Because there were no polar ice caps, the water remained a consistent, nurturing temperature from the equator to the high latitudes. It was a global womb, a vast and shimmering blue expanse that cradled life in a state of perpetual summer. As you submerge yourself in this dream, feel the water rise up to meet you not with a chill, but with the sensation of a warm silk blanket. Beneath the surface, the chaotic sounds of the wind and the rustling ferns are replaced by a profound, echoing thrum. It is the sound of the ocean's heart, a low-frequency vibration that resonates through your very core, steady and eternal, in the sun-drenched shallows of the early morning. The light filters down in long, dancing curtains of turquoise and emerald. Here we encounter the ancient reefs. These were not yet the coral reefs of our modern era, but complex cities built by sponges, bryozoans, and hardy corals that grew in intricate fractal patterns. They look like frozen forests of stone, draped in the soft velvet of algae. Thousands of ammonites drift among the reef's spires, their coiled shells ranging from the size of a thumb to the width of a wagon wheel. They move with a slow, hypnotic buoyancy, pumping water through their delicate siphons to hover in the current like living jewels. Their shells catch the light, flashing with iridescent shades of pearl and opal as they turn lazily in the tide dot. As we move further from the shore, the seafloor drops away into a deep, inviting blue, and we meet the true masters of this liquid sky. Imagine a creature that looks like a dolphin forged from the stars and the deep. The Optimosaurus glides past us, its body a perfect, streamlined teardrop designed for effortless movement. It does not struggle against the water. It is a part of it. Its skin is smooth and dark, reflecting the shadows of the deep, and its eyes large. Plate-sized orbs are designed to capture the smallest glimmers of light in the twilight zones of the ocean. To watch an ichthyosaur move is to witness the very definition of grace. With a single, slow sweep of its powerful tail, it vanishes into the blue, leaving behind only a trail of tiny, shimmering bubbles. These creatures were the ultimate expression of adaptation. They had returned to the sea millions of years prior, and the Jurassic was their zenith. They lived their entire lives in the open water, even giving birth to live young beneath the waves. Imagine a mother ichthyosaur resting in a high-current channel, her body swaying slightly with the flow of the tide. There is no urgency in her world. She is a creature of the currents, guided by the magnetic pull of the earth and the ancient memory of the water. Her breathing is infrequent, a slow exchange of air at the surface that sustains her for long, meditative dives into the silent dark. Further down, where the light begins to fade into a soft indigo haze, we find the plesiosaurs. If the ichthyosaurs were the sprinters of the sea, the plesiosaurs were the poets. Imagine a creature with a wide, turtle-like body and 4 large paddle-shaped flippers that move with the synchronized grace of a bird's wings. Its neck is long and serpentine, tipped with a small, refined head that darts through the water with the precision of a needle. The plesiosaur doesn't swim so much as it flies through the water. It moves in slow, sweeping arcs, its flippers creating gentle vortices that spin away into the darkness. It is a creature of immense curiosity, its neck winding through the kelp forests like a curious vine, searching for the silver flash of a fish or the slow movement of a squid. The kelp forests of the Jurassic were cathedrals of amber light. Giant algae, some reaching hundreds of feet toward the surface, swayed in the underwater breeze of the currents. As you drift among these towering stalks, you can hear the soft clack-clack of shells hitting one another and the distant, muffled songs of the great marine reptiles. It is a world of filtered light and heavy shadows, a place where time seems to stretch and fold. A large pliosaur, the apex predator of the deep, passes far below us. It is a mountain of muscle and bone, yet it moves with a terrifying, silent beauty. It is the Allosaurus of the ocean, the silent regulator of the blue, ensuring that the balance of the seas remains as perfect as the balance of the land. The daily life of the Jurassic Sea was a cycle of light and pressure. During the day, the surface layers were a riot of activity, shimmering shoals of fish darting through the reefs, pterosaurs dipping their beaks into the waves, and the constant, rhythmic surfacing of the air breathers. But as the sun begins to set, the ocean undergoes a profound transformation. The light fades from turquoise to cobalt, then to a deep, impenetrable midnight blue. The creatures of the deep begin their nightly ascent, rising from the cold, high-pressure trenches to feed in the nutrient-rich surface waters. This is the great vertical migration, a slow-motion parade of life that has occurred every night for hundreds of millions of years. The sound of the Jurassic Ocean at night is a masterpiece of minimalism. There is the low, distant groan of the tectonic plates as the Atlantic Rift continues to widen, a sound that vibrates through the water like the pedal note of a great organ. There is the soft, rhythmic clicking of the ammonites as they adjust their buoyancy, and the occasional, haunting whistle of a plesiosaur as it calls out to its kin across the vast, dark expanses. It is a soundscape that encourages the deepest rest. A white noise generated by the movement of a planet's worth of water. Imagine resting on a bed of soft, silken sand in a shallow lagoon as the moon reaches its zenith. Above you, the surface of the water is a shimmering mirror, reflecting the stars in a distorted, beautiful dance. The water gently rocks you back and forth, a cradle governed by the celestial pull of the moon. Nearby, a group of small plesiosaurs has gathered in the lee of a reef. They are resting, their flippers moving just enough to keep them stationary in the gentle flow. Their long necks are tucked back against their bodies, and their breathing is slow and shallow. They are the image of contentment, safe in the knowledge that the ocean will provide everything they need. The Jurassic Seas were not just a habitat. They were a witness to the planet's slow architectural changes. As the continents drifted apart, new seaways were formed, creating different currents and new opportunities for life. The water was the medium through which the Earth communicated with itself, carrying heat from the tropics to the poles and nutrients from the deep to the shore. To be in the Jurassic Sea is to be at the center of the world's circulatory system, feeling the pulse of the tides and the steady, unhurried flow of the great oceanic conveyors. As the night progresses, the bioluminescence begins to wake. Tiny plankton, disturbed by the movement of a passing ichthyosaur, flare up in brilliant sparks of neon blue. Every movement in the water leaves a trail of cold, ghostly light, as if the stars themselves have fallen into the sea and are being stirred by the fins of the giants. A plesiosaur swimming through this light looks like a creature made of liquid diamonds, its every curve outlined in a glowing, ethereal fire. It is a sight of such profound beauty that it feels as though the ocean is dreaming aloud, telling stories of light and shadow in a language made of color. The stability of this world is what makes it so soothing. The Jurassic Seas did not know the concept of a storm that could break their spirit. Even the greatest hurricanes of the era were merely ripples on the surface of an ocean that was too deep and too vast to be truly disturbed. Beneath the waves, there was always peace. There was always the steady temperature, the reliable currents, and the infinite blue. It is a world that invites you to let go of your terrestrial burdens, to shed the weight of your worries and simply float in the warm, salt-thick embrace of the past. We move deeper into the night, following a pod of ichthyosaurs as they head toward the open ocean. They move with a collective intelligence, their bodies shimmering in the moonlight each time they break the surface for a breath. The sound of their splashing is a soft, rhythmic percussion, a reminder that even in the middle of the sea, life is a constant, beautiful effort. But here, the effort is matched by the reward. The ocean is full of life, a boundless buffet of silverfish and soft-bodied cephalopods, all sustained by the tireless energy of the Jurassic sun stored within the water. The transition from the depths of the shimmering blue sea back to the height of the world is a slow, weightless climb. As we leave the warm embrace of the Tethys, the air begins to thin and cool, smelling not of salt and kelp, but of the crisp, high-altitude winds and the dry, ancient dust of the coastal cliffs. We are rising now, lifting our gaze from the soil and the surf to the vast open expanse of the Jurassic sky. This was not merely a void above the earth. It was a complex, bustling highway of wind and light, a domain where the laws of gravity seemed to soften, and where life found a way to conquer the very air. Imagine the Jurassic coastline, where the land meets the sea in a dramatic display of limestone precipices and jagged basalt towers. These cliffs, weathered by millions of years of rhythmic tides, served as the launch pads for the masters of the air, the pterosaurs. In the soft, fading light of a long afternoon, the sky is a pale, washed-out indigo, streaked with high cirrus clouds that look like the feathers of a giant bird. To look up is to see a world in constant, graceful motion. The pterosaurs are not birds, nor are they bats. They are something entirely unique to their temur, lineage of leathery-winged explorers that turned the sky into a sanctuary. Let us settle our focus on a creature like Imagine it perched precariously on a narrow ledge of a sea-facing cliff. Its body is small, covered in a fine, hair-like fuzz called pycnofibers, which keeps it warm in the high-altitude chill. Its wings are works of biological art, thin, tough membranes of skin stretched from a vastly elongated fourth finger down to its ankles. As the wind whistles through the crags, the Ramphorhynchus remains perfectly still, its long, needle-toothed beak pointing toward the horizon. It is waiting for the perfect thermal, a rising column of warm air that will act as an invisible elevator, lifting it into the heavens without the need for a single flap. The wind in the Jurassic was a constant, living force, because the world was a greenhouse. The temperature differences between the land and the sea created powerful, reliable updrafts along the coasts. You can hear the wind now a low, hollow moaning as it rushes through the gaps in the rocks, and a sharp snapping whistle as it catches the edge of a pterosaur's wing. To the flying reptiles, the wind was a language. They could feel its strength, its direction, and its moisture content through the sensitive membranes of their wings. Flying was not a struggle. It was a conversation with the atmosphere. As the Ramphorhynchus finally leans into the abyss, it doesn't fall. It catches. The wing membranes snap taut, and suddenly the creature is part of the sky. It glides with an effortless, sweeping motion, its long, diamond-tipped tail acting as a rudder to stabilize its flight in the turbulent coastal air. Imagine the sensation of that flight, the cool air rushing over your skin, the world below shrinking into a tapestry of green and blue, and the sheer intoxicating freedom of the heights. From up here, the great sauropods look like slow-moving stones in a field of moss, and the vast ichthyosaurs in the water are nothing more than silver flashes in the deep. The Jurassic sky was shared by a variety of forms, each adapted to a different niche in the air. While the smaller, long-tailed pterosaurs, like Ramphorhynchus, darted over the waves to snag fish with pinpoint accuracy, larger forms were beginning to emerge. Imagine the pterodactylus, a creature with a shorter tail and a more compact, efficient design. It moves through the inland forests, navigating the spaces between the giant conifers with the agility of a dragonfly. Its flight is quiet, a soft whoosh-whoosh of leather against air, as it searches for insects or small vertebrates hiding in the high canopy. It is a creature of the borders, the border between the trees and the open sky, the border between the day and the night. The cliffs themselves were bustling cities of life. Every ledge and crevice was a potential home for a pterosaur. Imagine the sound of a colony at rest as the sun begins to set. It is a cacophony of soft clicks, guttural croaks, and the occasional sharp cry that echoes off the stone walls. There is a sense of community here, a shared reliance on the safety of the heights, high above the reach of the Allosaurus and the other land-bound hunters. The pterosaurs could fold their wings and drift into a light, watchful sleep. Their large eyes, designed to see in the dim light of dawn and dusk, would stay half open, reflecting the silver glow of the rising moon. As the evening progresses, the light over the Jurassic coast becomes a deep, golden honey. The moisture in the air catches the rays of the setting sun, creating a haze that makes the entire world look like an oil painting. This is the time when the skyfishers are most active. Imagine a giant pterosaur, perhaps an early relative of the later giants, soaring miles out over the open ocean. It doesn't flap its wings for minutes at a time. It simply holds them steady, its vast wingspan catching the trade winds that blow across the teeth. It scans the surface for the ripple of an ichthyosaur or the glint of a shoal of fish. When it finds its target, it performs a slow, elegant spiral downward, its shadow growing larger on the water until, with a splash no louder than a falling leaf, it plucks its meal from the waves. The transition from day to night in the Jurassic sky was a slow, chromatic shift. The blues faded into violets, and the violets into deep, velvety blacks. As the sun disappeared, the stars would begin to emerge with a clarity that we can only dream of. Without the light pollution of the modern world or the dust of human industry, the Milky Way was a bright, glowing bridge across the heavens. The pterosaurs would use these stars to navigate. Their ancient brains mapped to the celestial patterns that guided them on their long migrations across the breaking supercontinent of Pangea. Life in the sky required a different kind of energy than life on the ground. To fly, these creatures had to be light, yet incredibly strong. Their bones were hollow, filled with air and reinforced with delicate internal struts, a design that predated the most advanced aerospace engineering by 200 million years. As you imagine yourself floating alongside them, feel the lightness of your own being. In the Jurassic sky, the weight of the world is left behind. There is only the rhythm of the wind, the steady beat of your heart, and the infinite horizon. The atmosphere of the Jurassic was richer in oxygen, which provided the high-octane fuel these flying reptiles needed. It made the air feel thick and supportive, like a fluid that they could push against. Imagine the sensation of leaning on the wind, trusting the air to hold you up. It is a feeling of profound security, a realization that the environment is not a hostile space, but a nurturing one. The sky was a playground of physics, where every gust and every thermal was an invitation to explore. As the night deepens, the wind along the cliffs begins to die down, turning into a soft, landward breeze. The pterosaurs returned to their roosts, their leathery wings folding neatly against their sides like umbrellas. They huddled together for warmth, their pycnofibers interlocking to create a soft, insulating layer against the night chill. You can hear the rhythmic, raspy sound of their breathing collective sigh that rises and falls with the tide below. The cliffs, once so busy and loud, settle into a contemplative silence. But the sky is never truly empty. In the moonlight, we might see the first ancestors of the bird screechers, like Archaeopteryx, moving through the lower branches of the coastal trees. They are not yet the masters of the high winds, but they are experimenters, their feathered wings allowing them to glide short distances between the ginkgo trees. They represent a new chapter in the story of the sky, a transition from the leather-winged giants to the feathered singers of the future. In the quiet of the night, their small, chirping calls add a new texture to the Jurassic symphony, a delicate melody that plays against the bass notes of the crashing surf. The Jurassic sky was a place of deep perspective. From the heights of the coastal towers, one could see the slow, inexorable change of the planet. You could see the way the forests gave way to the plains, and the plains to the rivers, and the rivers to the sea. You could see the smoke from the distant volcanic rifts, a reminder that the earth was still a work in progress. But from up here, all of it felt harmonious. The chaos of the surface was smoothed out by the distance, leaving only a sense of grand slow-motion order as you drift closer to sleep. Imagine the sky as a vast dark ocean above you. The stars are like distant campfires, and the moon is a silent guide. You are resting on a ledge of soft, weathered limestone high above the world. The air is cool and clean, and the sound of the ocean below is a distant, rhythmic hum. You feel the presence of the pterosaurs around youth warmth of their bodies, the softness of their breathing, the steady, patient pulse of their lives. You are safe in the heights. The wind has become a whisper now, a soft lullaby that tells of the clouds and the stars. It carries the scent of the sea up to the cliffs, a briny reminder of the world we explored before. You are suspended between the toothed deep blue of the water and the deep black of the sky. It is a place of perfect equilibrium, where the gravity of your thoughts has no power, and your spirit can soar as freely as a ramphorhynchus on a summer thermal. The world we have traveled through tonight is not a static one, but a slow and majestic dance of stone and water. As we settle deeper into the quiet of the Jurassic night, imagine that the very ground beneath the sleeping giants is alive with a subtle, imperceptible movement. This is the story of the Earth's great wandering, the slow rhythmic drifting of the continents that shaped the winds, the rains, and the very heartbeat of the Jurassic world. It is a story told in the language of deep time, where the ticking of the clock is measured in the opening of oceans and the rising of mountain ranges. A process so patient it feels like the steady breathing of a planet in a deep, dreamless sleep at the start of our journey. The world was unified as Pangaea, a single, vast landmass that stretched from pole to pole. But as the Jurassic progressed, the Earth began to exhale. Deep within the crust, the heat of the core pushed upward, creating great swells and rifts in the ancient stone. Imagine a giant, silent crack opening in the heart of the world, a rift that would eventually become the Atlantic Ocean. It didn't happen with a roar or a crash. It happened with the quiet persistence of a river carving through sand, inch by inch, century by century. North America began to pull away from Africa and Europe, creating a narrow, shimmering seaway that invited the tides of the Tethys to flow into new, unexplored territories. This drifting was the great architect of the Jurassic climate. As the land masses separated, they allowed the ocean's moisture to penetrate deeper into the hearts of the continents. The vast, scorching deserts that had dominated the Triassic began to soften and fade, replaced by a world of humid air and predictable rains. The climate was a global embracer greenhouse world where the heat was trapped by a thick blanket of carbon dioxide and water vapor, creating a consistent warmth that reached even the highest latitudes. There were no frozen wastes at the poles. Instead, there were forests of hardy conifers and ferns, growing under the pale light of the midnight sun. Imagine the Jurassic seasons. They were not the sharp, dramatic shifts of the modern world, where autumn brings the death of leaves and winter brings the silence of snow. In the Jurassic, the seasons were a rhythmic cycle of wet and dry, a pulse of hydration that governed the movement of the great herds. The world lived by the monsoon. As the sun's path shifted in the sky, it pulled the great belts of clouds with it, bringing months of torrential, life-giving rain to the thirsty plains. You can hear the sound of the Jurassic monsoon, now not a storm to be feared, but a heavy, rhythmic drumming on the thick leaves of the forest. A sound that meant the rivers would soon rise and the ferns would grow once more. During the wet season, the floodplains became vast, shallow mirrors of the sky. The rivers, fed by the rains in the distant, rising mountains, would overflow their banks, spreading a rich layer of silt across the land. This was the time of abundance. The Diplodocus and Apatosaurus would follow the retreating waters, their massive feet sinking into the fertile mud, grazing on the lush carpets of horsetails that seemed to spring from the earth overnight. The air was heavy, sweet with the scent of damp soil and ozone, and the world felt infinitely green. A landscape of endless possibilities where every drop of water was a promise of growth. Then, as the clouds moved on, the dry season would arrive with a soft, golden light. This was not a time of drought, but a time of consolidation. The air became clearer, and the vast inland seas sparkled under a sun that felt warm and constant. The great forests would slightly hunker down, their resinous leaves holding on to the moisture they had stored. The water in the riverbeds would shrink to deep, quiet pools, where the crocodiles and fish would wait for the cycle to begin again. The herbivores would move toward the permanent lakes, their migrations timed to the ancient rhythm of the planet's tilt. It was a time of long, sunny afternoons and cool, starry nights, a season of stability and rest. The movement of the continents also created the first great mountain ranges of the modern era. As the plates pushed against one another, the earth buckled and rose, creating the ancestral peaks of the Andes and the North American Cordillera. These mountains were the rainmakers. They caught the moist winds coming off the widening oceans, forcing the air upward until it cooled and released its water in spectacular high-altitude storms. Imagine standing on the slopes of these young mountains, looking out over a world that is literally being built beneath your feet. The peaks are jagged and volcanic, the air is thin and crisp, and the view stretches across a continent that is finding its final shape. The Jurassic world felt unified even as it was breaking apart, because the land masses were still relatively close. Life could move freely across the bridges of stone that still connected the north and the south. This is why we find the same families of dinosaurs in the red rocks of Utah as we do in the plains of East Africa. It was a global culture of giants, a time when the earth was one large, interconnected garden. The continental drift was like a slow-motion puzzle, the pieces drifting apart so gradually that the animals living on them never felt the transition. To them, the world was eternal, a boundless expanse of fern and forest that stretched to the edge of the sea in the quiet of the night. As the moon reflects off the newly formed sea, we can feel the immense power of these geological forces. They are the same forces that keep our world alive today. The slow churning of the Earth's mantle that recycles the crust and regulates the temperature of the atmosphere. In the Jurassic, this process was in its prime. The planet was a masterpiece of thermal regulation, a world that had found the perfect balance between the fire of the interior and the water of the surface. It was a planet that knew how to take care of itself, creating a sanctuary for life that lasted for tens of millions of years. Imagine the atmosphere as a soft, invisible weight pressing down on the landscape. It was richer, denser, and more vibrant than the air we breathe today. This density allowed the wind to carry more moisture and the heat to be distributed more evenly. It was an atmosphere that nurtured giants. The high carbon dioxide levels acted like the glass walls of a greenhouse, trapping the sun's energy and preventing the nights from ever becoming truly cold. Even in the middle of the night, in the heart of the continent, the air remained lukewarm and soft, like the breath of a sleeping animal. As the continents continued their drift, they created deep, isolated basins that would eventually become the world's great oil and gas fields. The massive amounts of organic matter, the fallen trees, the drifting plankton, the ferns of 1,000 generations were buried under the shifting sands and the rising seas. This was the Earth's way of storing the sun's energy, a gift from the Jurassic to the distant future. As we rest tonight, we are literally sitting on the legacy of this era. A world that was so productive, so full of life, that it left behind enough energy to power civilizations that would not exist for another 200 million years. The seasons of the Jurassic also influenced the growth of the trees. If you were to look at a cross-section of a petrified Jurassic conifer, you would see the rings of its life, wide bands of growth from the long, wet summers, followed by thinner, denser lines from the drier winters. These rings are the fingerprints of the climate, a record of every rainstorm and every sunny day that occurred in an era before memory. They tell a story of consistency and resilience, of trees that lived for centuries in a world that provided everything they needed. The light of the Jurassic was filtered through this rich, moist atmosphere, creating colors that were softer and more saturated than the colors of today. The sunsets were not sharp and fiery, but long, lingering graduations of violet, rose, and gold. The midday sun was a bright, diffused glow that eliminated harsh shadows, making the forest floor a place of gentle, even light. This was a world of soft edges, where the sky and the land seemed to blend together at the horizon, and where the air itself felt like a physical presence, a warm and constant companion as the night deepens. The tectonic plates continue their silent inch-by-inch journey. The rift that will become the Atlantic is now a wide, dark ribbon of water, reflecting the stars of a different sky. On one side, the ancestors of the lions and the elephants are hidden in the DNA of tiny, scurrying mammals. On the other, the foundations of a new world are being laid in the mud of the floodplains. The Earth is a work in progress, a masterpiece that is never finished, a story that is always being rewritten by the wind and the rain. The climate of the late Jurassic was the peak of this stability. It was the moment when the planet reached its most comfortable state, a time when life could afford to be extravagant, to be huge, to be slow. There was no pressure to adapt to cold, no need to survive a winter, no reason to hurry. The Jurassic was the Earth's long, peaceful afternoon, a time when the sun never seemed to set on the empire of the dinosaurs. It is this sense of eternal, unhurried time that we tap into as we drift toward sleep, the feeling of a world that has all the time it needs to grow, to change, and to simply be. As the moon hangs high over the shifting silhouettes of the continents, we descend once more from the high winds and the deep waters to the soft, silent floor of the Jurassic world. Tonight, our story is not about the giants that moved or the hunters that watched, but about the quiet, green foundation upon which all of that majesty was built. To understand the Jurassic, one must understand the plants, the patient, unhurried life forms that turned the sun's fire into the emerald fabric of the world. Imagine the Earth not as a theater of action, but as a vast, breathing garden. A place where the rustle of a leaf is the most important sound in the world, and where the slow, upward reach of a trunk is the most significant movement of the age. The air in the Jurassic understory is thick, sweet, and eternally damp. As you settle into this dream, imagine you are very small, resting on a bed of ancient moss at the foot of a tree that has stood for 500 years. The scent is overwhelming and comforting. It is the smell of rain-soaked bark, of crushed pine needles, and of the deep, rich loam that has been building for eons. In this world, there are no flowers to scent the air with perfume. Instead, the fragrance is earthy, resinous, and clean. It is the scent of a world that is purely, unapologetically green. The ferns were the first to claim the land after the great changes of the past, and in the Jurassic, they were the carpet of the world. Imagine a sea of green fronds stretching as far as the eye can see beneath the canopy of the giants. These are not the delicate ferns of a modern windowsill. These are robust, ancient survivors. Some are as small as a coin, clinging to the damp rocks near a waterfall, while others, the tree ferns, rise 20 feet into the air on trunks made of densely woven roots. Their fronds are intricate masterpieces of geometry, unfurling from tight, fuzzy fiddleheads in a slow-motion dance toward the light. Listen to the ferns in the breeze. It is a soft, shushing sound, like the whisper of 1,000 silk ribbons rubbing together. When the rain falls, the ferns catch the drops, holding them in the delicate serrations of their leaves, before letting them slide off in silver beads to the thirsty earth below. They are the lungs of the understory, exhaling oxygen into the humid air and creating a cool, sheltered microclimate where the smaller creatures of the Jurassic find their sanctuary. To the ferns, time is measured in the unfurling of a frond and the shedding of a spore. They do not hurry. They simply exist, a green tapestry that binds the soil to the sky. Rising above the ferns are the cycads, the rugged sentinels of the Jurassic plains. Imagine a plant that looks like a cross between a palm tree and a pineapple, with a thick, armored trunk and a crown of stiff, waxy leaves that fan out like the feathers of a prehistoric bird. The cycads are the tough survivors of the plant world. Their leaves are edged with sharp points, a quiet defense against the browsing giants. In the center of their crowns, they produce massive consum, bright orange, some deep crimson that hold the seeds of the next generation. These cones are the jewels of the Jurassic forest, the only splashes of vivid color in a world of 1,000 shades of green. The cycads lived at a pace that is almost impossible for us to conceive. A single leaf might stay on the plant for a decade, moving slowly from a vibrant emerald to a dusty gold, before finally falling to join the leaf litter. They watched the centuries pass without moving an inch, their roots deep in the warm earth, their crowns reflecting the suns of 1,000 summers. To touch the leaf of a cycad is to touch the texture of history. It is cold, waxy, and incredibly strong. Built to withstand the heat of the noon sun and the weight of the tropical rains. They are the anchors of the landscape, the solid, unmoving points around which the rest of life revolves. And then there are the true masters of the heights, the conifers. In the late Jurassic, the conifers reached their magnificent peak. Imagine the Araucaria, the ancestor of the monkey puzzle tree, rising 200 feet into the air. Its trunk is a massive pillar of resinous wood, covered in scales that overlap like the armor of a dragon. Its branches are arranged in perfect, mathematical whorls, reaching out to catch the sunlight that filters through the high-altitude mists. These trees were the skyscrapers of the living structures that defined the vertical limits of the world. The conifers were the source of the great resins that would one day become amber, trapping the secrets of the Jurassic for the future. Imagine the golden sap oozing slowly from a wound in the bark, a thick, honey-like liquid that smells of pine and sun. As it flows, it captures the dust of the forest, the spores of the ferns, and perhaps a stray feather from an Archaeopteryx. It is the Earth's own way of writing a diary, a slow and sticky record of a world that was too beautiful to be forgotten. The sound of a conifer forest is the sound of the wind through the needles are high, thin whistling that sounds like the breath of the stars. These plants were not just the backdrop of the world, they were the very foundation of its energy. Every calorie of strength in the body of a Brachiosaurus came from the leaves of these trees. The plants were the alchemists, taking the carbon from the air and the light from the sun and turning them into the building blocks of life. When you look at a Jurassic landscape, you are looking at a giant solar engine, fueled by the chlorophyll in the leaves and the water in the soil. It was a perfect, closed loop of existence, where nothing was wasted and everything was part of the green cycle. The Jurassic was also the era of the ginkgo. Imagine a tree with leaves shaped like delicate fans, turning a brilliant, buttery yellow in the drier months before falling to the ground in a golden carpet. The ginkgo is a living fossil, a bridge between the ancient world and our own. In the Jurassic, they were everywhere along the riverbanks, on the slopes of the rising mountains, and in the heart of the deep forests. Their leaves were soft and succulent, a favorite food for the smaller herbivores. To see a ginkgo grove in the moonlight is to see a world of silver fans, swaying in the breeze like the ghosts of 1,000 summers. Beneath the canopy, the world of the plants was a world of competition and cooperation. The mosses and liverworts fought for space on the fallen logs, while the fungi worked silently in the dark to break down the wood and return its nutrients to the soil. It was a slow-motion battle, fought over decades and centuries. A fallen conifer might take 500 years to disappear, its massive trunks slowly being claimed by the green tide of the forest floor. There was no trash in the Jurassic. There was only the constant, rhythmic recycling of life. The seasons of the Jurassic were marked by the behavior of the plants. In the wet season, the forest would experience a burst of growth so intense it was almost audible. You can imagine the sound of 1,000,000 buds opening, of 1,000,000 seeds germinating in the warm mud. The world would become a deep, dark emerald, so thick with life that the ground was invisible. In the dry season, the plants would slow down, their leaves turning a dusty olive as they waited for the return of the rain. It was a time of quiet endurance, a time when the roots reached deeper into the earth to find the hidden reservoirs of water. The relationship between the plants and the dinosaurs was a masterpiece of coevolution. The plants developed thick bark and sharp thorns to protect themselves, while the dinosaurs developed long necks and specialized teeth to reach the leaves. But it wasn't just a struggle. It was a partnership. The dinosaurs moved the seeds of the trees across vast distances in their bellies, ensuring that the forests could spread as the continents drifted. The plants provided the oxygen that fueled the giants' massive bodies, and the giants provided the nutrients that fueled the plants' growth. They were two halves of a single, breathing whole. As the night settles over the Jurassic Garden, the plants enter their own state of rest. At night, the process of photosynthesis pauses, and the trees begin to respire, taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide in a slow, rhythmic exchange with the atmosphere. The forest breathes with you. The ferns droop slightly under the weight of the evening dew, and the cycad leaves curl inward to protect their centers from the night chill. The world becomes a place of shadows and silhouettes, where the only movement is the slow sway of the branches in the nocturnal breeze. Imagine resting your head against the trunk of a great conifer. You can feel the vibration of the wind in its branches, a low-frequency hum that travels through the wood and into your bones. You can feel the coolness of the bark and the solidity of the trunk. This tree has seen the rise and fall of 1,000 suns, the passing of 100 herds, and the slow drift of the stars across the heavens. It is a monument to patience, a living witness to the enduring power of life. In its presence, the worries of your day feel as small and fleeting as a single spore in the wind. The Jurassic night is a time of quiet preparation for the plants. Deep in the soil, the roots are absorbing the minerals and water that will fuel tomorrow's growth. In the cones of the cycads, the seeds are maturing, waiting for the right moment to fall and begin their own journey toward the sky. The forest is not inactive. It is simply working at a different pace, a pace that is attuned to the turning of the earth and the cycle of the moon. It is a world that knows how to wait, how to grow, and how to endure. As the moon begins its slow descent toward the western horizon of the late Jurassic, we pause to listen not to the sounds of the night, but to the silence of the ages. Tonight, we move beyond the specific lives of the hunters and the giants, beyond the rustle of the ferns and the spray of the sea, to look at the most profound force of all, the relentless, beautiful passage of time. The Jurassic was not a moment. It was a vast, shimmering ocean of years, over 50 million of them stretching out in a sequence of days and nights, so numerous they are like the grains of sand on an infinite beach. In the quiet of this dream, imagine the earth as a grand, slow-moving hourglass, where every grain that falls is a generation lived, a forest grown, and a world transformed. To understand the Jurassic, we must let go of our human scale of time. We think in decades, perhaps a century if we are lucky, but the Jurassic breathes in millions. Imagine standing in a single valley for 10 million years. In that span, the mountains on the horizon would visibly crumble and rise again. The river at your feet would change its course 1,000 times, carving new canyons and abandoning old ones. And the very stars above would shift their positions as the solar system drifted through the galaxy. Yet, throughout this immense stretch of time, the pulse of life remained constant. It was a relay race of existence, where the torch was passed from one generation to the next with a quiet, unwavering certainty. Think of a single Diplodocus mother, standing in the golden light of a late afternoon. She is the result of 5 million years of her ancestors' successes. Every curve of her neck, every rhythmic beat of her heart, is a legacy of millions of individuals who lived, breathed, and found their way in this world before her. When she lays her eggs in the soft, warm soil of the floodplain, she is not just continuing her own line. She is contributing to a chain of life that stretches back to the dawn of the world and forward to the end of time. The eggs are small, fragile things, yet they carry within them the blueprint for giants. A code that has been refined by the trials and triumphs of 1,000 generations. The passing of millions of years in the Jurassic was like the slow turning of a kaleidoscope. Each turn brought a slight variation, a new experiment in form and function. You can imagine the forests changing as the millennia rolled by. A grove of conifers might dominate a hillside for 10,000 years, only to be slowly replaced by a forest of ginkgos as the climate shifted a fraction of a degree. The ferns would carpet the ground, their spores drifting on winds that blew over landscapes that no human eye would ever see. It was a world of becoming, where every creature was a bridge between what was and what would be. As the millions of years passed, the very air of the Jurassic changed. The volcanic rifts continued to exhale carbon dioxide, fueling the lush growth of the greenery, while the vast forests exhaled the oxygen that allowed life to grow to such impossible scales. It was a planet-wide conversation, a constant exchange of elements that kept the world in a state of vibrant equilibrium. Imagine the sheer volume of life that passed through the Jurassic, the trillions of insects that buzzed in the wetlands, the billions of fish that shimmered in the seas, and the millions of dinosaurs that left their footprints in the mud of the riverbanks. Each one lived a complete life, full of its own small moments of warmth, hunger, and rest. The continents, too, were on their own long journey. In the time it took for one lineage of Allosaurus to evolve into another, the Atlantic Ocean might have widened by hundreds of miles. The world was literally expanding, creating new coastlines, new weather patterns, and new opportunities for life to explore. This was the slow motion of the Jurassic world that was never the same from 1 million years to the next, yet felt eternal to anything living within it. To a Brachiosaurus, the mountains were permanent. To the earth, they were as fleeting as clouds. In the quiet of our dream, we can feel the weight of these millions of years. It is a comforting weight, like a heavy, warm quilt. It tells us that life is not a fragile accident, but a robust and persistent force, even when the great extinctions of the past had cleared the stage. Life returned with a renewed vigor, filling every niche and corner of the planet with color and movement. The Jurassic was the era where life truly learned how to be magnificent. It was a time of grand experiments, where the earth tested the limits of how large a creature could be, how long a neck could grow, and how high a wing could soar. Generations of life came and went like the tides of the Tethys Sea. Imagine a riverbed that has been a watering hole for 1 million years. In that time, the stones have been worn smooth by the feet of countless creatures. You can see the layers of history in the banks of the river, each layer of sediment representing 1,000 years of floods and droughts, 1,000 years of life and death. In these layers, the bones of the past are turned to stone, becoming the fossil record that would eventually tell the story of the Jurassic to a world that had forgotten it. The Earth is its own library, and every stratum is a page written in the language of mineral and bone. The scale of this time is a lullaby. It reminds us that our own lives, however brief, are part of a continuum that is almost too vast to imagine. We are made of the same atoms that once formed the scales of an Allosaurus and the needles of a Jurassic pine. Those atoms have been recycled 1 million times over, passing through the soil, the water, and the air in an endless, shimmering dance. When we sleep, we are reconnecting with that ancient rhythm, the steady, unhurried pulse of a planet that has seen it all. Imagine the silence of a Jurassic night after 10 million years of such nights. The moon has risen and set millions of times. The stars have rearranged themselves in the sky, yet the sound of the wind through the trees remains the same. The smell of the damp earth remains the same. The feeling of the cool night air remains the same. There is a profound peace in this consistency. It is the peace of a world that knows its own mind. A world that is not in a hurry to get to the future because the present is so full and so beautiful. As the Jurassic drew toward its close, the world began to prepare for the next great chapter. The continents were moving into positions that would eventually create the modern world. The first flowers were beginning to appear in the undergrowth, tiny and unassuming, yet carrying the seeds of a floral revolution. The birds were becoming more diverse, their feathers becoming more complex, their songs beginning to fill the morning air. The giants of the Jurassic were still the masters of the earth, but the whispers of change were everywhere, carried on the wind and the water. This transition was not a tragedy, it was a transformation. In the grand scale of the Jurassic, change was the only constant. Species appeared, flourished for 5 million years, and then slowly faded away, replaced by something even more refined, even more perfectly suited to the world. It was a process of constant polishing, of the earth refining its own creations. To see the Jurassic as a whole is to see a work of art in progress, a masterpiece that took 50 million years to paint. As we rest tonight, we are floating on the surface of this deep time. We let the millions of years wash over us like a gentle tide. We feel the presence of the generations that came before, the trillions of heartbeats that have echoed through the Jurassic forests. We are not alone in the dark. We are surrounded by the memory of a world that was lush, vibrant, and incredibly patient. The Jurassic is a reminder that the Earth is a patient mother, willing to wait millions of years for life to reach its full potential. The night is now at its deepest, the point where the past and the present seem to touch. The mists of time have gathered around our bed, blurring the lines of the room and replacing them with the silhouettes of the ginkgo and the conifer. We are breathing the air of the late Jurassic, a rich and heavy atmosphere that has traveled across the eons to find us. We are grounded in the soil of the Mesozoic, a soil that has been nurtured by the life and death of 1 million giants. The stars above us are the same stars that the Allosaurus watched from its hollow. They provide the same steady, silver light, a light that has traveled through the vacuum of space for millions of years to reach our eyes. In this light, we see the true nature of time. It is not a line, but a circular cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal that has played out on this planet for billions of years. The Jurassic was just one beautiful turn of that circle, a time when the world was a garden of giants and the sky was a kingdom of leather and light dot, as you drift into the final reaches of sleep. Let the scale of the Jurassic comfort you. Let the millions of years be a soft pillow for your head. You don't need to worry about the future, for the Earth has seen 1,000 futures come and go. You don't need to hurry, for the planet moves at its own majestic pace. You only need to be, to breathe, and to let yourself be carried by the current of time. The mists are thickening now, turning the world into a soft, formless grey. The giants have faded into the trees, and the hunters have retreated into the dark. The sound of the sea has become a distant, rhythmic whisper, and the wind through the ferns has died down to a sigh. The earth is settling into its long, geological rest, and we are settling with it. We are part of the story, a single grain of sand in the great hourglass of the world. As the moon of the late Jurassic begins to dip toward the edge of the world, painting the high canopy leaves in shades of tarnished silver and deep, liquid velvet, we find ourselves standing at the silent threshold of a great change. Tonight, we do not speak of endings, for in the long memory of the earth, there are no true endings, only transitions, like the slow shifting of a dream from one vivid landscape to the next. The world is beginning to stir with the first faint whispers of the Cretaceous period, but it does so with a profound and calm acceptance. There is no haste in this transformation. It is as natural as the cooling of the evening air or the slow, inevitable turning of the tide. Imagine the Jurassic forest in these final millions of years. It feels more established, more dignified than ever before. The giant sauropods, those living mountains of the plains, continue their slow migrations, their heavy footsteps a familiar percussion against the earth. But the world around them is subtly, beautifully changing. The air is becoming slightly more active. The continents have drifted far enough apart to invite new, complex weather patterns that dance across the widening oceans. It is a world that has mastered the art of being the Jurassic, and now it is preparing to become something new. If you look closely at the forest floor, nestled among the ancient ferns and the rugged cycads, you might see a tiny, miraculous change. For millions of years, the world was a palette of 1,000 greens, but now, the first flowering plants, the angiosperms, are beginning to wake. They are not yet the flamboyant blossoms of a mountain meadow, but humble, small pioneers. Perhaps a simple leaf with a tiny, inconspicuous bloom. They represent a new way of life, a partnership between the soil and the wind that will one day fill the world with color. But tonight, they are just a quiet promise, a soft secret whispered between the roots of the giant conifers. The transition from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous was not a wall of fire or a sudden catastrophe. It was a slow, graceful fading of one era into the next. It was the earth exhaling one long, deep breath and beginning to inhale another. The great Allosaurus and Stegosaurus continue their lives in the dappled light, unaware that their lineages are slowly shifting, evolving into the new forms that will define the age to come. This is the beauty of deep time. Change is so gradual that it is indistinguishable from peace. It is the steady work of 1,000,000 seasons, each one slightly different from the last, building a bridge toward a future that is already being written in the DNA of every living thing. The climate is beginning to soften even further. The inland seas are reaching their greatest extent, carving the land into a mosaic of lush islands and shimmering lagoons. The water is a warm, turquoise embrace, moving with a rhythmic consistency that reflects the heartbeat of the planet. As the Jurassic draws to a close, the planet feels full. Every niche is occupied, every forest is vibrant, and the oceans are teeming with a diversity of life that has reached its absolute peak. It is a moment of perfect maturity, the golden hour of the Mesozoic era. Imagine the sound of this transition. It is the sound of the wind moving through the needles of a forest that is starting to see the arrival of broad-leafed trees. It is the sound of the river carrying the sediments of the old mountains down to the sea to build the foundations of the new. It is a quiet, industrious sound, a symphony of preparation. The earth is a patient artist, and it is beginning to layer new colors onto its masterpiece, more vibrant blues in the sky, more delicate textures in the undergrowth, and more complex songs in the morning air. The great sauropods, the Diplodocus and the Brachiosaurus, are the anchors of this world, and they remain so even as the age shifts. They are the constants in a changing landscape. To watch them move is to see the physical embodiment of time, slow, heavy, and unstoppable. They do not fear the coming of the Cretaceous, for they are the ones who have shaped the Jurassic into a paradise. They have created the paths, fertilized the soil, and lived in harmony with the cycle of the sun. They are the guardians of the transition, the gentle giants who carry the legacy of the past into the promise of the future. As we stand in the cooling twilight, we can feel the immense security of this process. The earth does not lose what it has created. It simply builds upon it. The ferns of the Jurassic will remain to carpet the Cretaceous forests. The conifers will continue to reach for the stars, and the spirit of the hunter and the grazer will find new expressions in the millions of years to follow. This is the calm acceptance of time. We do not mourn the passing of the day, for we know the stars will follow. We do not mourn the passing of the Jurassic, for we know it is the very soil from which the future grows. The stars above us tonight are the same stars that will shine down on the Tyrannosaurus and the Triceratops millions of years from now. They are the eternal witnesses to the Earth's long journey. In their silver light, we see the true scale of our own existence. We are part of a story that is so vast, so deep, and so beautiful that our only responsibility is to witness it and to rest within it. The transition of the world is a lullaby, a reminder that we are held in the hands of a system that has never failed to find its way through the dark. The air is very still now, the kind of stillness that comes just before a new dawn. The mists have risen from the floodplains, wrapping the trunks of the ancient trees in a soft, white gauze. The world is tucked in, ready for its long, geological rest. The sounds of the forest have faded to a rhythmic murmur, the occasional crackle of a dry leaf, the soft hoot of a nocturnal creature, and the steady, distant sigh of the sea. Everything is in balance. Everything is at peace. We move with the mist, drifting through the quiet groves where the giants are sleeping. We feel the warmth of their massive bodies radiating into the night air. A reminder of the incredible life that this period has fostered. We see the first small mammals, our own distant ancestors, huddled in the hollows of the trees, their tiny hearts beating in sync with the rhythm of the planet. They are the small keepers of the flame, the ones who will carry the memory of the Jurassic into the ages that follow. The passage of time is a river, and we are floating on its surface, letting the current carry us away. There is no need to paddle, no need to steer. The river knows where it is going. It has carved the canyons of the past, and it will fill the oceans of the future. We close our eyes and let the movement soothe us, feeling the weightlessness of our own spirits as we merge with the flow of the millions of years. The Jurassic is behind us, and the Cretaceous is ahead, and we are exactly where we are meant to be in the quiet, restorative center of the dream, as the moon finally touches the horizon, casting its last, long rays across the prehistoric world. We let the colors of the Jurassic fade into a soft, monochromatic gray. The greens, the blues, and the golds of the day are replaced by the deep, comforting blacks and indigos of the night. The world is a silhouette, a beautiful memory that is preparing to wake up in a new form. But for now, it is time to sleep. It is time to let the story rest. The Earth is a cradle, and the Jurassic is the song it has been singing for 50 million years. It is a song of growth and endurance, of giants and hunters, of seas and skies. It is a song that has no end, only verses that blend into one another in a seamless, eternal melody. As you drift into the final reaches of sleep, let that song be the last thing you hear. Let it fill the spaces of your mind with the image of a world that is lush, warm, and infinitely patient. You are resting on the foundation of history. You are breathing the air of a planet that has mastered the art of survival. You are safe in the knowledge that change is not destruction, but a beautiful, slow-motion growth. The Jurassic night is closing its eyes, and so are you. The giants are still, the winds are hushed, and the earth is ready for its long, restorative slumber before the next great chapter begins. The silence is absolute now, a deep and velvet silence that reaches back to the beginning of time. It is a silence that holds the weight of all the lives that have ever been lived and all the forests that have ever grown. It is a silence that invites you to let go, to shed the layers of your day, and to sink into the soft, warm darkness of the past. You are a part of the Jurassic, and the Jurassic is a part of you, as the first faint light of a new era begins to gather far beyond the horizon. We leave the world to its peace. The giants will wake in a world that is slightly different, slightly more colorful, slightly more complex, but for now, they are exactly where they belong, and so are you. In the heart of the dream, in the center of the time, in the quiet, green soul of the world. Sleep now, while the countenance drift and the stars shine. Sleep while the ferns grow and the oceans sigh. Sleep in the calm, steady embrace of a planet that is moving forward with grace and beauty. The Jurassic night is complete. The story is told, and the world is at peace softly now. The mists are closing in. The giants are dreaming, and the night is yours.